Man, we can't figure out scheduling. My group isn't interested in my story. My game master rejects all of my ideas. I'm terribly afraid of spiders and my GM keeps including spider monsters into the campaign. Hi, I'm Matthias, game master of several TTRPG games, and today we'll talk about how you should run the first session of your campaign. How to address problems before they arise and align everyone's expectations so that everyone at the table can have an exciting and enjoyable game together. The system we use for this today is called Session Zero. So, what exactly is a Session Zero? As the name suggests, it's a session that happens before you even start a campaign, and in it you discuss matters with your players that have to be discussed before you can start playing. You don't just create characters in Session Zero, the main task is to get everyone on the same page. You explain your campaign world and the game system, as well as how communication outside of the role-playing game will work and how you'll handle problems. Definitely bring a pen and paper, because everyone has a say here and you gotta take notes. Feel free to use this video as a guide, and if you're already playing but didn't have a Session Zero, it's not a problem to take care of it in an ongoing campaign either. Before my very first campaign, I never had a Session Zero with my players, but we quickly made up for it when the concept was introduced to me, and it significantly improved our game. The campaign ran for 3 years, and while it wasn't solely because of this late Session Zero, it definitely contributed positively. But how does Session Zero work? Even before the session, I recommend giving your players a brief presentation about your campaign. And by that I don't mean a PowerPoint presentation, but a short description in 2 to 3 sentences so everyone knows if they are interested in playing such a game. If they only realize when they arrive at your table that you want to play sci-fi and they only like fantasy, that's a little bit awkward, isn't it? We play in a fantastical world that takes place on floating islands and ships. And instead of water, the sea is made out of clouds. The Pirate Queen was executed a few months ago, and the various captains are now fighting for supremacy over the Cloud Sea. Meanwhile, the civilian population suffers from constant raids, and the scattered duchies can't find an agreement to form a strong front against the criminals. This offers enough for everyone to paint a picture, but at the same time leaves enough room for your players to incorporate their own ideas into your shared game world. Alternatively, you can prepare 3 pitches and have everyone vote which one they like best. Remember that the Game Master should also have fun. If, for example, you absolutely don't like horror, then a horror campaign is immediately out. And don't write a novel. No one is interested in that anyway. The details will emerge during the game. 2 to 3 sentences are really enough for a sneak peek, and that is all your introduction is. This was the work you gotta put in before Session Zero. What do you need to take care of during the session? Here are some questions to take into consideration. When and where will you play? Online? My house? Peter's house? Alternating? Weekly? Bi-weekly? And is bi-weekly twice a week or every 2 weeks? How long will the campaign go? Will it have an end? How long does a session go? What happens if a player can't make it? For example, when I play with 4 players, the game always takes place if at least 2 can make it. But the big finale only happens if everyone's there. Think about this in advance. Maybe you play a one-shot if not everyone can make it. Or maybe someone else will run one. Or you play a board game. Discuss it with your players. It's a good idea to keep the option of playing online at least open. Sitting at the table together is of course more fun, but sometimes it just doesn't work out because we all have very busy lives. For the length of the campaign, I recommend scheduling 3 to 5 sessions at the beginning, and if everyone enjoys it, you can continue afterwards. As mentioned in my video about one-shots, which you'll find somewhere up here, it's easier to sell the idea of playing a game for a few weeks than to jump right into committing to playing Dungeons & Dragons every Friday night for the next 3 years. More questions to consider. How do you handle food? Is eating allowed at a table? Who brings the snacks? Is alcohol allowed? Is there a smoking break? Are cell phones banned from the table? Clarify all this in advance and involve your players in the dialogue, and make sure it's on equal footing. Only if you find agreeable terms together you can all enjoy the game, and that should always be the main goal of playing role-playing games. What do you envision the game to be like? Do you want to bash some monsters' heads in while drinking beer and munching on crisps? Do you want to portray a realistic world where the players' actions have realistic consequences? Is the focus on combat, role-playing, or maybe funny voices? Are the rules strict or just a loose guideline? There's no right or wrong answer to any of those questions, but you need to communicate clearly what kind of atmosphere the game should create. Is it a serious or funny world? Are you going on an epic quest like in Lord of the Rings? Are you having episodic play where there's a different monster to deal with each week? Agree on media to use as reference points. Lord of the Rings for a serious adventure, Discworld for something funny, Supernatural for the monster of the week. Everyone should have a clear idea what your shared game looks like. And two big topics. How do you handle conflict between characters? Is it allowed? Are they resolved with dice rolls or narratively? And second, what about character death? Is it rare? Does it never happen? Is death lurking around every corner? Players invest a lot of emotional energy into their characters, so communicate clearly what can happen and what can't, and find an agreement with your players. I think character death should be a part of the game, as the game can only be fun with real danger. But maybe you view that differently. And, very importantly, check in with your players later to see if the expectations are still aligned with what you discussed in session 0, as perspectives can change significantly over weeks and sometimes even months. Next important and big topic, safety tools. And this applies even to games where violence is not intended. You might think, safety tools? We're telling a story and rolling some dice. What's that all about? Well, role-playing games are always at least partly a form of escapism, and many don't want to confront certain topics in their hobby. Discuss this with your players. Again, openly and on equal footing. Everyone has things they don't want in their game. For example, I find it uncomfortable to roleplay sex scenes with my friends. The topic can be mentioned, but not explicitly played out. This way, all your players can say which topics they don't want mentioned at all, and which can be mentioned but not played out. This is called Lines and Veils, and there will be a separate video solely on safety tools in the future. And if you think this is a bit silly, think of a movie night. You wouldn't bring a horror movie if you got someone in your group who refused to watch those, would you? And talking about movies, also discuss how brutal everything can be. Is the game rated 12+, 16+, or even 18+. Oh, and keep in mind that not everyone wants to bring those things they're uncomfortable with up in front of everyone else. So offer your players the options to talk to you in private or send you a text message. At this point, you've hopefully taken a lot of notes that you'll internalize for the campaign. It's best to make a short protocol that you can send your players later, as remembering all this is not easy, neither for you nor for your players. So, we've talked about structure, the mood, themes and basic idea of your campaign. It's time for what everyone is eagerly waiting for. Creating characters and playing. Yes, we also play. When I invite people for Dungeons and Dragons, for example, they expect to see Dungeons and Dragons, or at least exciting sword fighting cool spells. And to play we need characters, which you now let the players create together. Have multiple copies of the material you need, as there's nothing more boring than sitting around, twiddling your thumbs while waiting for the player to your left to finally finish with the rulebook so you can start to create your own character. Let your players think about how their characters fit into the group. After all, role-playing is a cooperative game, and the lone wolf who can't get along with anyone might be a bit out of place. Create shared backstories where each character has a connection to another character and maybe a non-player character that the player makes up. Of course, you don't give everyone a pen and say, "Alrighty then, write me 2 pages in 10 minutes, chop chop." No, everyone works together here. Ask your players some questions about their characters to think about. For example, how does my character cope with stress? Is it gambling? Alcohol? What are they willing to die for? Freedom? Family? Who in the group do they already know? Do they owe someone something? Are they related to someone? Who else do they have in this world? A smuggler contact? A good friend who works for the press? Let them write all of that down. After creating the characters, it's finally time to play. You probably don't have much time left because character creation takes quite a while. So I always recommend start in the middle of a fight. Let your players describe their characters first so everyone has a picture in mind. Then you set a scene which starts calmly until suddenly something happens and chaos breaks loose. Use this to immediately incorporate the starting conflict into your adventure. Let's take Cloud's idea from the start. The ship the PCs have booked the fare on is peacefully flying through the cloud sea. The sun is shining, one of the sailors is whistling a cheerful tune while scrubbing a deck. Then, suddenly, a ship emerges from a cloud. It hoists the Jolly Roger, and before the captain can even shout orders, grappling hooks fly, and a crew of varrets boards your ship. What do? After hopefully defeating the villains, you find strange wanted posters on them. Pictures of your characters with a message, their life or yours. And just like that, you started the plot, and the players want to know how it continues. Take inspiration from Baldur's Gate 3, where it doesn't start with a long explanation of the world and the narrator bombarding you with lore for 30 minutes. No, you start on a spaceship, get a parasite planted right into your brain, and the dragons attack. You immediately want to know what's going on and how it continues. With this, you have everything at hand for a successful session 0. Do you have additional tips that absolutely should be included? Write them in the comments. And if you liked my video, share it with your friends. And don't forget to like and subscribe. That's it from me, and we'll see each other next week in my new video.